Hey, welcome back to the big picture of the Bible. In our last program, we saw how Assyria came down and destroyed Israel and took them into captivity. And today, they're coming after Judah, but Isaiah and Hezekiah are at the temple praying. They're going to be protected, and they're going to win this war. This is big. My friends, if you go to Isaiah 36 and 37, you can read all about this story. So I'm going to be walking you through this story. When Assyria went after Israel, this is what God called them to do. But he did not call them to go after Judah and Jerusalem. And so as we read this story, you're going to see the clash of two worldviews. These two worldviews are right now on the earth. There are two worldviews that always clash, because one comes from Satan and one comes from God. Let's read about it. In Isaiah 36, verse 1, this is what it says. Now in the 14th year of King Hezekiah, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, came up against all the fortified cities of Judah and seized them. And the king of Assyria sent Rabshakeh from Lachish to Jerusalem, the king of Hezekiah, with a large army. And he stood by the conduit of the upper pole on the highway of the fuller's field. Then Eliakim, the son of Hilkiah, who was over the household, and Shebna, the scribe, and Joah, the son of Asaph, the recorder, came out to meet him. And so this is what happened. As Assyria came down into Israel and destroyed Israel, which would be north of Jerusalem, they did an end around. They went around and came up and started hitting these cities. And Lachish is a military city. It was key for them. If they destroy this military city, then they've got a chance to take all of the land, and Jerusalem would be in their hands. And so here the king of Assyria is fighting down in Lachish, and he sends this representative up to Jerusalem to let them know, we're coming, we're going to destroy you. And so as Assyria comes to destroy, this is going to set the whole city in a turmoil. They're going to be like, uh-oh, what's going on? And so here the representatives from the king Hezekiah are up on the wall looking down on Rabshakeh. And his worldview is way different than their worldview. The way he looks at life and the way they look at life, the Jews look at life, are two totally different things. Let's get into it. And so in verse 4 it says, Then Rabshakeh said to them, Say now to Hezekiah, Thus says the great king, the king of Assyria, What is this confidence that you have? Do you know what? Satan says that to us a lot of time. What confidence do you have in your God? What kind of confidence do you have against me? I'm the big army. I'm the strong army. Nobody can stand against me. And guess what? We say our God is greater than you. He who is with us is greater than he who is with you. And that's the conflict that's going on right here. Watch how it plays out. He says, I say, your counsel and your strength for the war are only empty words. Now on whom do you rely that you have rebelled against me? Behold, you rely on the staff of this crushed reed, even on Egypt, on which if a man leans, it will go into his hand and pierce it. So is Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to all who rely on him. But if you say to me, we trust in the Lord our God, is it not he whose high places and whose altars Hezekiah has taken away, and has said to Judah and Jerusalem, you shall worship before this altar? Do you see what's going on? This is the clash of worldviews. Assyria comes, and they come around and they say, oh, you kings, you're relying, Hezekiah, on Pharaoh. No, he wasn't. He wasn't relying on Pharaoh. He didn't trust in Pharaoh. He trusted in the Lord his God. So Rabshakeh tries that thing. Then he's going to try this. Are you going to depend on the Lord your God? Well, Hezekiah, you're the one who tore down all the altars. He tore down the altars. That's right. You know what the altars were? To false gods that the king before him, his daddy, set up, King Ahaz. You see, Isaiah came during the reigns of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah. Listen to me. Uzziah, good king, good politically, good economically, good spiritually. Jotham, good king, good politically, good economically, good spiritually. Ahaz, terrible politically, terrible economically, terrible spiritually. Didn't want God. He was going along with all these people who wanted to serve the false gods, and he began setting up. And Hezekiah, when he became king, his son, he said, no more, no false gods in the land. And he destroyed them and destroyed their priests. So Hezekiah stood strong for the Lord. He loved the Lord with all of his heart. He walked in the ways of David. And so when Rabshakeh says this to the guys up on the wall, they're probably looking at each other. I don't think he realizes we didn't tear down altars to the Lord our God. We tore down altars to false gods. And so Rabshakeh has a totally different worldview. He thinks his gods are greater than the Creator who created him. That's what we see today in America. We see people trusting in gods, political gods. Oh, socialism. Oh, you know what? If we have a great government that provides all of our needs, that will be our God. There's only one God. And the Creator God, the God that America was built on, that's the only God that there is. And we need to trust in Him. And so, what do you think they were going to do sitting there? They have this big, huge army out there. Their military city just got taken by Rabshakeh. The guys are still fighting down there. Well, look what it says, what it goes on to say. It says, have I now come without the Lord's approval against this land to destroy it? Listen to what he said. Assyria knew they had the approval of the Lord to go after Israel, but not after Judah and Jerusalem. They did not have God's approval to this, so they're lying about this. The Lord said to me, go up against this land and destroy it. Then Rabshakeh stood and cried out with a loud voice in Judean and said, hear the words of the great king, the king of Assyria. Thus says the king, do not let Hezekiah deceive you, for he will not be able to deliver you, nor let Hezekiah make you trust in the Lord, saying, the Lord will surely deliver us. This city will not be given into the hand of the king of Assyria. But I want you to know something. God had made a promise to Hezekiah and every single Jew that if armies greater than you come against you, if you come to this temple and bow and humbly pray to the Lord your God, he will deliver you. And Hezekiah did put everybody's trust in the living God. And they were not listening to Rabshakeh. They weren't going to listen to this stuff. They heard him. They wouldn't even respond to him because he was wrong and they knew it. And he did not. Look, all the circumstances said, Judah and Jerusalem, you're dead. All the circumstances said, you're going down. But the circumstances didn't matter to them. Why? Because faith is bigger than circumstances. Your faith can be bigger than a coronavirus. Your faith has to be bigger than the circumstances around your life because your God is so much bigger. If you have a big God, you have small problems. And Hezekiah and Isaiah, they've got a big, 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 big God. And so 100,000 soldiers out there wasn't going to be anything for them. They knew their God could take care of this. Watch what happened. In Isaiah 37, this is what it says. Hezekiah, chapter 37, verses 1 and 2 and verse 6. When King Hezekiah heard it, he tore his clothes. He covered himself with sackcloth. He entered the house of the Lord. Then he sent Eliakim, who was over the household, and Shebna the scribe, and the elders of the priests. They covered with sackcloth to Isaiah the prophet, the son of Amos. Isaiah said to them, thus you shall say to your master, thus says the Lord, do not be afraid because of the words that you've heard, with which the servants of the king of Assyria have blasphemed me. Look at the two worldviews. Here Rabshakeh comes. He's very confident. Nobody can stand before him. He stands in the name of his gods. He tells Hezekiah, don't trust in the Lord your God. He's not going to be able to deliver you. And that was blasphemous. And Isaiah the prophet, Hezekiah, he doesn't run to get counseling here. oh, go get a military, help me, get a military, help me. No, no, no. He runs to the temple, bows before the Lord his God, and prays. Go get Isaiah. And Isaiah has a message for him. Hezekiah, trust me. The Lord your God will deliver you. You know what? You can be delivered. If you put your hope and your trust in the living God, he will deliver you. That's what he does. And so in Isaiah 37, verse 10, God says this, thus you shall say to Hezekiah, king of Judah, do not let your God in whom you trust deceive you, saying Jerusalem will not be given into the hand of the king of Assyria. So this was Rabshakeh again saying, don't think you're going to be delivered. So here's the worldview that says, hey, Christians, you're not going to be delivered from this coronavirus. Hey, Christians, you're not going to be delivered from governments that tell you you're not allowed to meet, you're not allowed to pray, you're not allowed to sing, you're not allowed to worship the Lord. Don't think we're going to be delivered, because our God is greater than their God. And Hezekiah, we got to be strong like Hezekiah. He's going to stand very strong. Verse 14, then Hezekiah took the letter that was written to him from the king of Assyria. He took this letter from the hand of his messengers and he read it. And he went up to the house of the Lord and he spread it out before the Lord God. So the king of Assyria wrote him a letter basically saying, give up, get it done, I'm going to destroy you, so give up. And he took the letter and he laid it out before the Lord his God. Have you ever laid out something before the Lord your God? God, look at this, what they're doing. You need to do that today, friends. We live in a time in America, we're being tested big time. Our economy is falling apart. We've got to stand up and lay this before the Lord our God and say, do you see what they're saying about us, Lord? Do you see what they're saying about you? Will you not move on our behalf? And Lord our God will. Watch what he does. It says, Hezekiah prayed to the Lord, saying, O Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, who is enthroned above the cherubim, you are the God alone. Of all the kingdoms of the earth, you have made the heaven and the earth. Incline your ear, O Lord, and hear. Open your eyes, O Lord, and see. And listen to all the words of Sennacherib, who sent them to reproach the living God. And so many today are rising up, reproaching the living God. Governors of states are reproaching the living God. Health commissioners are reproaching the living God. People are reproaching the living God all over our nation. And we lay this letter before you, O Lord our God, and we ask you to stand up for your people because you promised you would, because you love us. And then I love what God did. Look at this. It says in Isaiah 37:36, then the angel of the Lord went out and struck 185,000 in the camp of the Assyrians. They were camped all around Jerusalem, 185,000 of them, dead. One angel against all of them. I'm telling you what, it's not even a contest. I mean, if this were a basketball game, I mean, it was over in 1 second. I mean, it's like, boom! And he won. The one angel can beat 185,000 Assyrians and kill them all. And so they arose early in the morning. Behold, they came out of the temple praying, and they looked, and they were all dead. Now, what sin did Assyria commit? They committed a sin that is common among nations. God calls a nation to do something, they begin to do it, and then they go beyond what God told them to do. And so God gives us a commentary on what happened with Assyria in Isaiah chapter 10. In Isaiah 10, verses 5 through 8, this is what God says. Woe to Assyria, the rod of my anger. Listen to me, folks. This is an evil nation. And God used them as his rod, the rod of God's anger against his own people. And he was going to use them, and he did use them against Israel. But then it says this, and the staff in whose hands is my indignation. So this is God's anger and indignation coming down on Israel through what Assyria was going to do, what they did. And then God says this, I sent it against a godless nation, and I commissioned it against the people of my fury to capture booty, to seize plunder, trample them down like mud in the streets. Yet Assyria did not intend to do this, nor does it plan so in its heart, but rather it is its purpose to destroy and cut off many nations. For it says, are not all of my princes like kings? Do you see what happened? They became so arrogant. Assyria said, we're going to go after other nations. God said, no. You're only supposed to go after this one nation. Forget you, God. We're going to do what we want. And so they followed after their own gods. They knew that God had sent them there. The one and true and living God sent them there. Even though they knew it, they didn't care. They said, well, we're going to follow our other gods. And those other gods tell us to do all this. Nobody can stand against our gods. And we'll go to Jerusalem and tell them, uh-oh, now you're standing against the living God, the true God, not an idol who can do nothing. And when they did that, they were destroyed. And I just look at our nation and other nations. You cannot do that. But God goes on and gives us a commentary in the book of Isaiah, and down in verse 11. In Isaiah chapter 10, verse 11, he says, shall I not do to Jerusalem and her images, just as I have done to Samaria and her idols? And so Isaiah is introducing us. God is telling Isaiah to introduce to us, Jerusalem, you need to get rid of all of your idols and your sins also. Hezekiah did it, but the people did not want what Hezekiah did. The people around the nation did not want what he was doing. And so you can see a righteous king brought blessing to the nation, even though the people wanted to do the wrong thing. And when Hezekiah died, the next king that came along gave all the people what they wanted, and it was evil. It was terrible. But what about Assyria? What's going to happen with them? Well, let's turn into Isaiah chapter 19. There's a promise from God about the future. And I want to talk to you about prophecy here for a second, because this prophecy is amazing. After Jesus comes back and he sets up his kingdom in the millennium, this is what's going to happen. So it says, this is what it says in Isaiah chapter 19, verses 23 to 25. He says, in that day, there will be a highway from Egypt to Assyria. And the Assyrians will come into Egypt, the Egyptians into Assyria. And the Egyptians will worship with the Assyrians. In that day, Israel will be the third party with Egypt and Assyria, a blessing in the midst of the earth. Can you imagine that? In other words, the grace of God is coming on these people. And then he says, whom the Lord of hosts has blessed, saying, blessed is Egypt, my people, Assyria, the work of my hands, and Israel, my inheritance. In other words, God is going to rebuild the temple there in Jerusalem during the millennium. And then in both of these places, he's going to have altars that people can go and worship the Lord our God. Is that not awesome? And you can see the grace of God in what he's talking about Assyria. And so in our next broadcast, we're going to talk about Jonah and Nahum and finish all the teaching about Assyria. So please, people, team up with us. Help us spread the good news of God's kingdom on the earth. Please press like and share others. Thank you for being with us.